Hey, this is Josh from Vacuums RS and Sewing 2 in Boulder and Arvada, Colorado, and today we're going to look at a Bissell shampooer that has a symptom of not spraying. There's another Bissell shampooer video that I've made that has Bissell shampooers that have dual brush rollers. This video is going to be relevant to those of you who have an older model unit which has a singular brush roll. You can see down here, we've got just one brush, right? There's a number of models that this is applicable to. I'll try to see if I can't get you a model list. There's slight nuance between different models, but this is going to be particularly relevant to you if you have a type of machine that has a soap dispenser here, and then your clean and dirty water tank is in the rear, right? And so this is specifically for does not spray, right? Does not spray and does not pick up are two totally separate functions of the unit. So a lot of times we have customers come in, they'll say, well, it doesn't spray or pick up. Well, yeah, no, it's not going to pick up if it's not spraying. There's nothing for it to pick up if it's not spraying. Specifically, if your machine is not spraying, this is the video for you. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do some external visual checks on the machine. I'm going to look at a couple different things. So on these units, you can see the belt over here. And on these units, the pump is actually belt driven. They probably already did this check in the showroom, but I will check regardless. So there's a belt right there that goes to the pump. From there, there's another belt that goes to the brushes. If your brushes are not spinning at all and the unit isn't spraying, then likely this belt is broken because they kind of daisy chain together, right? I'm going to turn it on real quick and we're going to test to verify that the unit is not spraying. The individual who checked it in is not great about troubleshooting shampooers on the check-in process, so I'm always a bit pessimistic about the accuracy of their assessment. So I'll go ahead and plug it in. I've already put water in it. It's important to note you need to have water in both the rear tank as well as the soap dispensing tank. If you run the soap dispensing tank empty and it's set to high traffic, what'll happen is it'll bleed air into the system and it can completely bleed out the whole system and it won't spray. So I'm going to remove the handle thingy right there. Sometimes what can happen is this tool will clog up, but the rest of the machine is fully functional. So I kind of get that out of the way, out of the gate, and I'll turn the machine on without the heater. So I've got spray out of the hose. The thing is with these units, however, sometimes you'll have spray out of the hose, but not out of the head. The reason for that is there's a heater in these units. The water that goes to the head flows through the heater. The water that flows through the hose bypasses the heater. So what's very common is the heater will crystallize the soaping solution, clog the system to the head, but you'll still get spray out of the hose. One thing I noted when I sprayed out of the hose is the first squirt had a lot of soap in it. So that very frequently is indicative of a clogged heater, which is really what I expect to find here. So I'm going to test to see if I'm spraying out the base, just to verify that what the customer reported is accurate. So I'm getting no spray out of the base. So the report was accurate. I'm going to go ahead and unplug this because working on water with live electricity is ill-advised. Now's a good time for our disclaimer. If you are not an authorized Bissell service technician, you may want to reconsider doing this video. It's not my problem if you electrocute yourself. That's up to you. If you don't feel comfortable with anything you see in here, bring it to an authorized Bissell service center. Do not bring it in parts. Don't start the job and bring it in a cardboard box because they don't appreciate that and they probably won't even touch it. I'm going to continue with the external visual inspection. So right here, we have a little doohickey. It's actually missing the little doohickey that spins around. There's supposed to be a little red thing in there that spins as water's flowing through it, but this is sort of a filter of sorts. And you can actually see in this filter the crystallized soap gunk that has been caught by this filter. And if you look in there, you can see, I mean, there's a ton of stuff in there. There's an absolute ton of stuff in there. I'm gonna try a trick here. Instead of opening up the whole machine, I'm gonna try to see if I can unclog right here, if that's where the clog is, and then flush the system from there. So I've got a really pointed pick, and there's a hole in here if I can find it. There it is. Well, there's a sign. So if you look right there, you can see a bunch of gunk just sprayed out. So what I had pressure behind that. So I'm actually going to be able to likely flush this to a great degree without even taking the system apart. Again, if you're not comfortable with this, don't do it. We've got electricity and water here. I'm going to cover this up with a cloth to absorb the water that sprays out when I try to flush this. I will plug it back in, turn it on. And I'm going to spray. I'm getting water through there now. Okay, so we're going to be able to flush this system without completely dismantling it and getting into the heater. One other visual inspection, it's not relevant in this case, but you do have a little filter right here inside the tank. You'll notice that this one does have a bunch of hair and it's clogged up. So this filter is actually here to keep hair that gets into the dirty water from like flying into the motor. That's what that's there for. And at first glance, it appears to be related to filtering the airflow, not anything to do with the pump or spraying or anything like that. But what's interesting about these models, they actually have a hose that we'll see later that goes to the suction area and into the pump that helps the pump to prime itself. If you have that air filter, that little red filter clogged with hair, and you have no airflow at all, what can happen is the pump won't be able to prime itself because it primes itself off airflow. It's a really odd duck, and people will frequently miss that. One other thing before we get into it, there is a red gasket on the bottom of your tank right here, and that engages down here in what's called the receiver assembly. It is very common that that red gasket will fall off of your tank and will stick inside of here, and you won't realize it. You'll just have this pink thing in there, and it looks like it's supposed to be there. That is supposed to be on your tank, and if it disconnects from your tank and is stuck in there, you won't get water from your tank into your unit. All of these are things that can be done from outside of the machine without having to tear the machine apart, that can prevent you from having spray. We are going to have to get inside the machine though. I'm able to flush it here. The problem is, from here we have a hose that goes down into these spray nozzles down here, and that hose is full of sediment that's going to clog up our spray nozzles. So even if I spray right now, if it works right now, that's not a good solution for the customer because I know there's stuff in the system that's going to clog it up. So we're going to go a little bit farther in. I'm going to take my water bottles out. There are 6 screws in the top of this to pop the top. Little trick, if you have a hammer, you can put the hammer handle under the rear of the machine. That'll keep your base up at about this level. If you don't put the hammer down there, the base will fall down and you kind of have stuff falling apart, and it's kind of hard to put the machine back together. But that handle will help to support it, because once we take this apart, the wheels are no longer going to be supporting it. So I've got 2 screws on the front. We need to be really careful with these machines. These machines are getting older. Wasn't the greatest plastic to begin with, and the plastic is real bit brittle, so it's real easy to break these. Particularly this upper housing is super easy to break. So I've unscrewed that, and I'm kind of lifting up on this nozzle right here to try to get it off. This machine is pretty well used, hasn't been taken apart before, so this is stuck a little bit. It will come off. It looks like it's gonna take my gasket with me. Oh, this is the older design too. There we go. So the gasket's gonna come off too. We can just press that back in there. Yeah, this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about brittle plastic. The gasket's stuck on it. I'll just press that back in. This is an older design. On the older ones, they had this little hook right here that hooked into that, which was part of what was sticking when I was taking it apart. I'm gonna slide this gasket back in here while I've got it open. Get that to sit in there. We'll reset that gasket that flopped out on us. Start at the bottom and just kind of push it back in there. Now this is actually considered user serviceable, this hood right here that I just took off with 2 screws. It enables you to take it off so that you can clean the intake right here if you're so inclined to do so. So I got 2 more screws back to where the water bucket goes. I'm gonna take those off. And I do see one problem right here. And this is, again, this is very common. So back here where this screw is, we can see where the housing right here is broken, where the screws in. And that's kind of a big deal because you have 4 screws, 1, 2, 3, 4, that hold the lower housing and the upper housing together. And a clamshell, and all of the strain on this machine on the wheels is right here on this clamshell. So at least one of those 4 securing points is broken, which is not good. Later on when we put it together, I'm going to try to find a small washer to put on here, which might help me to secure it. I may even resort to possibly a drywall screw to try to clamp it together. The problem with that solution is it's a one-shot deal. You can put the drywall screw in one time and it's going to gore in there and it'll stick and it'll work real well. But if the unit has to be taken apart a second time, it's damaged the lower housing using that screw and it probably won't go back together again well. So now we see the bottom of this. And this is the assembly that we had gotten that clog in. You can see there's a water line going into it. This is the water line that's coming from, it's actually coming from up here. It goes into it and then the black water line comes down. You see a T right here, which then goes to these 2 spray nozzles. If you look inside this hose, this unit has clear hoses. A lot of them have black hoses, but you can actually see the crystallized soap solution inside there. And that's why we're doing this, because we know that crystallization is there, and when it gets to the spray nozzles where there's a reduction in the space that the water's got to flow through, the spray nozzles are going to clog up. So we're going to disconnect both of these. I'm going to take the spray nozzles off entirely and kind of pull this whole assembly here around, and I'm going to take the spray nozzles off. Old machine, so everything is tight, stuck, and brittle. If you have a hard time getting these nozzles off, if you take a hairdryer or a heat gun and heat up the hose a little bit, that'll make it a lot easier. So again, if you're not comfortable with this, stop right now. It's not my fault if you electrocute yourself. We're about to put the water tanks back in. So for a system flush on this upper housing assembly, if you turn it over, you're going to find this little doohickey right here is kind of hanging there loose. And this thing actually hooks into that adjustment right there that says heavy traffic water rinse. And it's a plunger that goes down into this mixer assembly. If you run the machine without this in it, there's an air leak right here and it will bleed out the entire machine. It won't work. So I'm going to take this plunger and shove it in there to plug it up. And then for thoroughness, I'm going to put the soap container back in there anyway. And then I'm going to put my back water container in there. And you want to make sure that you're seating it quite well. You also want to make sure that this is kind of attached here. That way you don't get a full suction leak. Again, having a sealed system and having the system working the way it's supposed to will help to make sure that the pump properly primes itself. This hose right here is what I was talking about. That's actually an air hose. So I'm going to plug the machine in. All right, so I'm going to put the cap back on here, sealing this up. I'm going to leave this little filter screen out for now. That will allow all of the sediment to flow directly through this assembly right here and then flush out these end hoses right there. I'm going to plug the machine in. I've got all of my water bottles in there. Turn it on and I'm going to spray. I've got a container on the floor. I'm going to Okay, so I used pure water there. Absolutely, under no circumstances should you ever put vinegar in any floor cleaning machine that has a pump in it. It will destroy it. We're just using clear water. I turn the heater on later on in the flush to kind of heat that heater up a little bit, potentially break loose any sediment that might be in the heater. I ran it for quite a while. I don't see any more sediment coming out, so I'm fairly confident that the heater on this unit is not clogged and that the clogs were later on down in the system. If you're finding that you're not getting spray here like we were, you're getting nothing here, the heater is up here in the handle assembly. Someday I'll do a video on that. I'm not doing it today because this one doesn't need to be open, but this is where the heater is. It's right here inside of the handle assembly. You have to take it apart you have to take the upper handle off, then take the screws out the back, and this will open like a clamshell. Then you can open the heater, you can clean that out, and then you can reassemble the machine. But for today, this is what we've got. I'm gonna visually inspect the spray tips. And I'll put a little, if you have a needle, that's actually ideal. If you can get it through, you can see it coming out there, and you do not have a clog and your spray tips are okay. Spray tips are white and the clogs are usually white crystal, so it's hard to look in there and see if you have a clog. I can actually see sediment inside of this one. I don't know if the camera can pick it up or not with me shaking, but there's actually sediment inside of this. So I'm gonna take this to the sink and actually rinse it out and then come back. So we've got a system that's fully flushed. We're gonna put it back together again. I mentioned at the beginning of the video about putting a hammer handle here, and you can see, I'll remove the hammer handle, you'll see why. You can see how it drops all the way down. It's not attached there. That creates a problem when you're putting it back together. So that's why we have that hammer handle in there. There's a small piece of plastic here, blue plastic, that is the part that was broken off from the upper housing. There's a massive dog who is here to assist. Are you gonna help with the Bissell Shampooer? Yeah? You don't want to? They're a big pain in the butt to clean. Yes, they are. You don't want to do that. There's no food in here, buddy. Come on. All right, we gotta. People want to know how to fix their Bissell. Okay, buddy. All right. So anyway, this right here, this plunger, we're gonna take it out. I'm gonna set it aside real quick. We're gonna reattach our spray tips. Put our hose clamps back on there on both spray tips. Slide right in there, and your hose around in there. I'll slide that one already attached, and in there, and then this hose kind of went under there for safekeeping, and that is out of the way. Okay, this has got to come back off because this actually goes on top of the upper housing, so we actually have to take that off for the moment before we put the upper housing on. So this piece right here, this is the piece that'll get you. If you forget about this or if you put it in wrong, you're gonna have problems. So the switch right here is a corkscrew. I'm gonna turn it all the way to one direction, and this little notch right here goes in the corner. And if I turn it, you'll see that that will lower and raise. That's what you're going for. So I'm gonna lower it all the way so that it's in there real firm. And when I drop the housing back on, I need to make sure I don't lose that screw, for one thing. When I drop the housing back on, I need to make sure that that little plunger is gonna drop directly in there. So I need to be careful to get that on straight. And you can feel it as it goes down. I think I got it. We'll know if I didn't get it because it won't work. But I'm looking pretty good right there. I think I should be okay. I'm stuck on something here. I'm gonna pop it off real quick. There's all kinds of things that you get stuck on when you're putting these suckers back together. Whoop. Looks like all my hoses are in right. I'm not sure what we're sticking on. Give it another try. Maybe I didn't drop it down quite right. Check my plunger. See, we'll leave this part in the video because it'll make you do-it-yourselfers feel better when you see me struggling. There we go. It went right down that time. I don't know. That time it worked. So I'm gonna put on my, I'm gonna put on the 3 back here. I'm gonna leave out the one damaged one for the moment because I'm gonna have to go look for an appropriately sized screw or washer for that. Be super careful when you're putting these in. I have the clutch on my drill set to the lowest possible setting. If you're hand tightening, don't get too carried away, He-Man. It's really easy to break the plastic on these older units. A lot of people want to repair these older units. They don't like the newer designs they have. Oh, I didn't get that snapped in. There's little tabs at the top up here that have to go in, which are now in. A lot of people want to repair the older units. They don't like the newer design. You can find some of these on the market still, but to my knowledge, they're not actively manufacturing them. It's just all old stock. Put in the belt guard. This little thingy will slide down in there. And then I'm going to put the filter back in. And on top of the filter, I'm going to put that. You're going to have a little red thing. It looks like the customer here lost theirs. It's a little fan that spins around while the water is flowing through that lets you know the machine is working. Theirs is gone. It doesn't affect functionality in any way. Put the water back in there, and I'm going to go find the appropriately sized screw or washer so that I can tamp this thing down effectively and get this fully secured. Okay, so I got a screw that had a slightly larger head to fill in there, and it's pretty secure. It looks pretty good. I'm happy with it. We're going to do our final test here. I'm actually going to try the hose again, even though it worked before. Make sure this isn't fully primed. Got good spray off the hose. And we've got good even spray out both sides. Oh yeah, looking good. All right, I'm gonna put it on the floor real quick because I don't want to get my bench wet, and we're gonna make sure that it picks up. I'm confident it will, but got a good pickup too. Okay, so that was a successful repair. Like I said, another issue that goes on is that the heater clogs. I've got another Bissell video that I go over heaters, but it's a different model than this. But conceptually, it's the same basic idea. You get into it, the heater's up here, you open it up, you clean it out. All we got left on here is we got to do a spit polish, make it look a little bit prettier. We don't really do full cleaning or service on these shampooers because the reality is with the shampooer, the first time the customer uses it, it's going to be dirty again anyway. What you can do to prevent this from happening to begin with, this customer, I'm pretty confident, probably has been, following the manual, using the Bissell shampoo, and that is likely the problem. What I've seen is that the Bissell soap is what actually crystallizes, particularly in their heaters. They heat it up, turns to crystal, clogs the system. We have an enzyme-based cleaner here called Unique. It's kind of similar, I think, in some ways to Nature's Miracle. It's a little less expensive because it's concentrate, so they're not shipping like whole gallons of it. A quart of it makes, I think, like 2.5 gallons or something. It's enzyme, it's a bacteria enzyme, so it doesn't create that crystallization in the systems. We've never had a problem. And frankly, it works better than soap anyway. So that's what I recommend to prevent this. Hopefully this video helped, and you can get your shampooer fix. If you have any questions, post your questions in the comments below. Give me a few days to respond. I do have other responsibilities, but if you have any questions that I can answer, I will certainly swing through YouTube and answer them for you.